I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Jack O'Halloran, co-founder and CEO of Skale Labs. Jack, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, excited to dive into the world of blockchains and the intricacies of what makes a great blockchain. I know you and your team have been working on this for quite a while. Before we dive into Scale, I would love to start with a little bit on yourself, your background in blockchain, and how that led to founding Scale.
Yeah, so I started my career in enterprise software, started in mobile security specifically. There's a lot of deep cryptography integrated to the first product I was working on called Good Technology. Actually, coincidentally, my co-founder, Stan of Scale, did our cryptography certification. We had the US government and CIA and US Senate and I think 90 of the Fortune 100 using this product. So I learned a bit about cryptography and security. But this was, before even Bitcoin launched. And then I started a machine learning company, AI company, that was a global leading platform in the life science industry on commercial execution side of the life science AI world. And I like to say that was AI when AI was not intelligent yet. It was dumb AI, and now we have smart AI. That got me on a path to understand, about building businesses, building communities, building technology. And I was looking to start my next company in 2017, and it was a no-brainer to do it around Ethereum. And that was my path. People thought I was a bit crazy. They're like, "You're leaving enterprise software to go work in crypto. You're nuts." And I think well, not all. I think these things go in waves, but I think the people listening here today understand that there's real meat on the bone here. We're creating real applications. We're going to change the world, and with programmable money and and business structures. So yeah, that was my path.
Amazing. That's a great breadth of experience being in cryptography before crypto and being in AI before most people. And now you're working on Scale, which I know is very innovative as well. And I would love to dive into the Scale network, what makes it different, what you and your team have built there in sort of a high-level overview.
Yeah, well, I'll take a step back before I get into the nuts and bolts of Scale and just say I was actually trying to build decentralized applications in 2017. And so was Stan Kladko, my co-founder. One of the things we realized is that the infrastructure was not there at all. And this was before people used the word layer 2, before they used, other modular scaling and ZK proofs and layer 3, all these terms didn't exist. And so we just thought of Scale as middleware. It was another blockchain that you build on Ethereum, you can connect to Scale for fast execution. For us, we were building always from this lens that we had to support millions or hundreds of millions of users. Just if you're building an enterprise software product or consumer grade Web2 product, you need to think about scaling user experience and performance with users. And back then, there were only around 10,000 daily active users using Ethereum and DeFi and all the applications that were there. It was a very small quantity of people. And then I give that background because there's just a tremendous amount of groupthink in how we scale Ethereum. And unfortunately, there's this dogmatic, almost religious perspective that guides us down a path that still does not cater well to normal end users. You still have to know how to use, be pretty technical, use MetaMask. And your average DeFi user, yeah, no problem. But your average Web3 user, your average gamer, it's just not accessible. And so we built Scale. We started this at the end of 2017. It took a long time to build. The mainnet launched October 2020, and we built it to make Ethereum faster. We now have just crossed 100 million transactions on chain in the network in the last year. And we've saved over about $1.5 billion in gas fees in the last year. And that's really because the V2 upgrade last June of 2022 enabled Scale to support normal user workflows and really bring this gas-free, fee-free experience to end users. And so we haven't always followed the same path as everybody else building in Ethereum. But it's interesting now the roads are coalescing, and a lot of our competitors' strategies are folding into the Scale strategy.
That's really interesting background there, especially understanding, the scalability issues of Ethereum. I think Scale, perfect name for a solution for that. But as you mentioned there about the adopting of decentralized applications, it's easy for people that are deep in it and they understand all the technical part. But I feel like, to actually scale, not just in transactions, but scale the amount of users to hundreds of thousands to millions, it's going to require lowering the technical barriers to entry to make it easier for people to start getting into Web3. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I'll say the challenge. The challenge with that is the easier Web3 is to use, the harder it is to be, secure at the same time. So security, decentralization, and kind of ease of use are all, just opposed. They're, each one is diametrically opposed to the other. And so that's what makes it hard. And so, so for us, we were able to build a dynamic that shifts a lot of the, more power and more fees to developers who are running applications. Now they still, can't impact somebody's money, and base level security is there, but they can create a dynamic with this gas-free experience to let people trigger on-chain transactions in a seamless behind-the-scenes way. And we call it an invisible Web3 experience. So that is the key, but you can't do that unless you have a way to, in a cost-effective manner, obfuscate gas fees away from the end user, or abstract them from the end user.
Mm-hmm. Great point. And now, talking about the scalability, you mentioned that balance of having the security and but also having functionality. How exactly does scale, without getting too technical, how exactly can you scale without sacrificing those other parts of the trilemma?
Yeah, well, so it all comes down to capacity and economics. Okay, so most blockchains are one finite database. If you add more servers, if you add more nodes, it doesn't add more capacity. You're just adding more security. Okay, blockchains are really, it's one database that can, satisfy a certain amount of transactions. Now, each of these actors has to play a role in saying, yes, this block is accurate. Let's move to the next one. But adding more doesn't add more capacity. And so that's the problem with all blockchains. Now, this new layer 3 model or modular multi-chain model or multi-chain network model, which I say new because it's getting so much, attention. And also you hear the word shared security and pooled security. These are all things Scale's been doing for a very long time. So instead of having one blockchain with finite capacity, there are many blockchains. And actually, there could be an infinite number of blockchains. The amount of chains can scale linearly in accordance to how many nodes are in the network, okay? Now, there's two other core pieces that are important to make that work. One, you don't want to fragment your security. If you just have a bunch of completely separate blockchains, well, you're not carrying and sharing any security across these different chains. Okay, so Scale has a way to have one unified validator set operating underneath all of these different chains so that they can also pool security with each other. They get this herd dynamic, herd protection dynamic by all being there together. Number two, the economics are important because you have to have an economic structure that will incentivize validators to set up more nodes and therefore create more chains. And that's why, basically why I'm saying, the economics are so critical to having actually limitless capacity. Otherwise, you're going to run into bottlenecks with chains, and the same problem you experience with one chain, you can experience with 10 when you get to that point. Okay, so does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit for sure. And one thing that I got out of that, which I think is important, more people will begin to understand, is the layer 3 aspect of it, and talking about modularity. And I've seen across the Twitter sphere and across the crypto chasm in the past months, starting to talk about modular blockchains versus monolithic blockchains. I feel like people overall understand layer 2 now as these scaling networks. Layer 3, not so many people are starting to understand. We're starting to add up the layers. Is that layer 3 this modularity of blockchains specifically, or is it more than that?
Yeah, it is and it isn't. I'm going to try to take another step back and make this accessible to everybody. So The goal with layer 3 is to have an limitless amount of blockchains to just increase supply while not fragmenting security. You still want to tie back your security. Now, there's different ways of doing that. Scale also is built on Ethereum, so a lot of the network security is hooked into Ethereum. Layer 3 models are, without getting too technical, one, they incorporate lots of app chains or individual or specific multi-chains like Scale has. Scale already has 20 chains in the network. But what layer 3s can do, they also can plug in zero knowledge proofs or roll-up techniques to connect the security of these smaller chains back to a bigger set. And that could be back to Ethereum. It could be back to a more centralized roll-up that then rolls back to Ethereum. And so what happens is people are getting experimental with layer 3 and layer 4 just because they're saying, well, if we can get more chains without splitting up our security, that's good. And that's the general premise of how Scale functions. Scale, by the way, is launching a zero knowledge proof. So it can have what I would say a Ethereum pure layer 3 method. Because a lot of Ethereum maximalists don't want any consensus being finalized on another blockchain. Whereas I feel like from a UX perspective and for lots of use cases, for example, within gaming, there's just tremendous opportunities to have fast finality and gas-free transactions in app chain models. So again, I'm getting in the weeds, but the point is everyone's trying to figure out how to have their cake and eat it too, have more supply without sacrificing security.
Definitely. And you mentioned there about app chains. I've been over a few discussions in the past week about app chains, and one of the main benefits from what I understand is the sort of, as you're talking about, having many blockchains and almost a standalone app so that it's not like as you would see in an ERC20 token, it's sort of stuck with Ethereum, and if anything happened to Ethereum, it could take down the app. Is that one of the main benefits, or maybe you can dive into more of the benefits of an app chain versus an app in that it's its own blockchain, so it can't get hurt by the overlying ecosystem, or what else is actually good about it?
Yeah, so a big piece, there's this noisy neighbor problem. So in blockchain, so let's say everyone's happily using this chain, and all of a sudden this hugely, high volume transaction application comes in and just starts chewing up all the bandwidth, right? And this happens a lot. And then people are like, let's shut this thing down. And it's this noisy neighbor, it disrupts everybody else. So an app chain enables really noisy neighbors to, live in their own walled garden where they can pay for as many transactions as they want. Now, the issue with that is it fragments liquidity, it creates UX issues for people to get assets over to those chains. And that's one of the reasons why Scale has created app hubs. And I'm going to be tweeting a lot about this in the near future, because I think we've been the first to market with a true multi-chain pooled security environment. What we found is that creates a lot of usability issues where if you just have one chain and you just show up with that one chain and you put everything's there, your money's there, I can go use that game, that DeFi app, there's no UX issue. You just plug your wallet in. And for people who aren't familiar with this, if your money's in one chain and then you try to go to another chain, you can still use the same Ethereum address, but you need to somehow bridge those assets over. Scale actually has a zero transaction free UX product that lets you move assets instantly for free between all Scale chains. And even that can add some issues. So we have app hubs where lots of similar type products can use similar type chains. Like there's a DeFi hub, there's a gaming hub, etc.
Okay, that's great to know. And I think looking back through the start of gaming in blockchain, we saw one of the examples was Axie Infinity. There were so many transactions going on that all of a sudden anybody else who was using Ethereum, they were paying high gas fees because of this one app that they're not even using. And that's like the noisy neighbor. And I feel like as we get to more mainstream adoption of gaming with blockchain integrated, this is going to happen again, because the gaming industry is so big. There's millions of players on specific games. When one game comes in, if it's not on layer 3, it's going to disrupt the whole network, and everyone's going to be paying more just because of these new people that come in. Is that right?
And that's exactly why we built Scale the way we built Scale, and why the community behind Scale. And, hey, we're just the core team getting things started. And, there's, hundreds of people every day building on Scale across the gaming ecosystem and Web3 ecosystem, and, different open source contributors. And, and I say this because people realize, especially in gaming, and that's why Scale has, if you go to DApp Radar, we're typically in the top 5 every single day in terms of transaction volume. It's because we have a lot of games, and games need a lot of transactions. And guess what? They don't want to be in another chain where they're driving up their own price or other people's price. And so that's why we have a gas-free model on Scale.
That's great to hear about the gaming. And from what I understand, games are still very early on. There's very few games that have millions of players that are going to drive new people into Web3. I'm curious on your insights into Web3 gaming and where we're at right now as opposed to where we're going to be in the coming years.
Yeah, and the thing about gaming, I'm forgetting the exact number. So instead of guessing, trying to remember, I'm just going to tell you to be able to look it up. Gaming revenue dwarfs the rest of the entertainment industry. Like, it absolutely dwarfs. It's like 50x or something of movies, for example, right? And look how much actors get paid, and even though they're on strike right now. But look how much revenue these businesses do. But gaming is just massive. But so gaming is a big category, and there's lots of subcategories in gaming. Web3 gaming specifically, I think, will create its own niche in gaming. But the real growth in gaming will also be when there's this integration behind the scenes of Web3 properties to traditional gaming, because traditional games don't need to change their culture. They don't need to change, how they interact, but they can, the players can get a ton of value out of having seamless secondary marketplaces and owning their own assets with NFTs, having digital currencies that have transparent, open, permanent properties. So these game companies can't just keep minting things and kind of making revenue at their whim and kind of hurting users, which is why Vitalik started Ethereum in the first place, if you go read about his World of Warcraft story.
Definitely. And, gamers, when you're doing all these transactions or getting items, and, if everything's tokenized, all of that's going to be on the blockchain, but they don't necessarily want to see that. Hopefully it's all in the back end, and they don't really have to worry about, watching transaction confirming. It should be instantaneous for the most part. I was looking at one of the recent studies that I saw Scale was involved in. It said it was one of the fastest blockchains for confirming transactions. Maybe you can touch on that?
Yeah. So Dartmouth Blockchain actually did a research study. They worked directly with core teams at Solana, Avalanche, Polygon, Scale, and they literally validated their white paper technique to test time to finality, which is how much time does it take from when a user hits a button and then to get to finality on chain. And Scale has instant finality, but there's still this kind of networking piece, and it was like 1 and some odd seconds. Scale was the fastest in time to finality and had the highest throughput, higher than Solana in real world throughput. So, and a lot of these projects claim they have thousands per second, and if you go look at the study, one of them claims thousands on their website, and in reality it's only 6 when they're using Ethereum virtual machine. And it's part Scale actually created a C++ Ethereum. It didn't just fork like Go Ethereum, which almost all of these Ethereum killers, all their power and throughput just gets wasted because there's still a bottleneck in Geth of how fast you can operate. And whereas we, or the Scale open source community created its own C++ Ethereum, which is super fast.
Wow.
In addition to consensus.
And does that help with being able to develop easily on the network?
Yeah, so if you go play Untitled Platformer or 0x Battleground, which is just like this, battle royale game that's AAA style. If you go play one of these games, you grab in 0x Battleground, you grab a gun. Well, guess what? You have that NFT. You own that now. You have the special weapon, the special tool. You do something. All these things are getting registered on the blockchain. The user doesn't have to hit MetaMask and accept and do these things in game. And so these things are really, we thought of them in 2018 as a pipe dream to be able to do, and you can do them now. So Gaming is just, I think, cutting the frontier for what we're going to see in all of these other Web3 enabled internet products. And gaming's a great, I'd say, leader and pioneer in a lot of new tech, and same will be true with blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Amazing to hear. And we don't have a lot of time left, but I wanted to touch on one more thing before we touch on the roadmap and what's next for you guys. You mentioned earlier about the ZK and zero knowledge proofs part of Scale. I'm curious on why is that important for maybe for the gamers or for people that are using the network, and does it really matter?
Yeah, you know what? So if you think about zero knowledge proofs, it's added security. And so for Scale, let's say I'm playing a game and I'm running around, I'm picking up things, I'm shooting things, I'm grabbing coins. You don't need to pay extra for a zero knowledge proof to validate that happened. The Scale consensus is way more, has more than enough security for that, and I believe to a whole world of DeFi. But for people that say, hey, well, I want an extra level of security because all of a sudden I got this NFT and it's worth 10,000 or $1 million. Mm-hmm. What you can do is you can integrate a zero knowledge proof into Scale. And for those high value use cases, which the user is not going to see any of this, the user just picks up, buys this valuable thing. Well, guess what? That gets imprinted onto another blockchain, back to the Ethereum mainnet through a zero knowledge proof, and it validates it. And then that could never be taken without overriding the security of the Ethereum mainnet. And so what Scale Levitation protocol does is it enables zero knowledge proofs and Scale consensus to operate in harmony. And we're actually going to be partnering with the zero knowledge proof builders as opposed to building our own, or Scale's own ZK tech. So Scale as a network and a community will be really having this wrapper that lets ZK techniques interact. But it's all about use cases. It's all about developers building for the right UX in terms of cost, security, and experience.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Thank you for explaining that, Jack. And before we go, I'd love to know what the next steps and the growth, and what do you think is going to happen in the industry, and how is Scale getting ready to grow for what's going to happen moving into 2024? Anything on the roadmap that's big that's coming up?
Yeah, so one, launching Levitation, the zero knowledge proof, is going to be huge. There's also next and Scale's decentralized, so on-chain governance is live. There's going to be a lot of cool things happening with chain economics that we're going to see push forward. I'm excited to see, community members and developers push forward these new initiatives. But in general, I think the main thing Scale needs to do well over the next year is just keep executing on the plan, because the tech is there that other people are trying to build and enable through layer 3. And, and I think there's a first mover advantage happening right now. And it's all happening behind the scenes because, you go to the headlines, you're reading about the price of Bitcoin and, ChatGPT and other things. But behind the scenes, there's just so much happening. And, that's really, I think, my feeling. And when I talk to the core team and talk to people in the community, I say, hey, let's do the blocking and tackling. Let's do the basics well. We have what other people are trying to build. Let's just go support developers and help Ethereum developers be successful, and then, let the other stuff pan out. But obviously you have to keep building for the future, but you also have to focus on what you have.
Definitely. Good approach. I love it, and I'm going to be following along for the updates. And Levitation Protocol sounds like an amazing name. I'm going to dive into the details of that as well. For the viewers that want to learn more about the network and also the games on it, or developers that want to try it out, what is the best way for them to learn more?
Yeah, so scale.space, Scale, if you're looking at my hat there, Scale with a K, the website will guide you to all the links. You can go to @Scale Network on Twitter and @Jack O'Halloran on Twitter. You'll see just Twitter is one of the best places, as well as Discord. Scale.chat will take you there. Telegram, there's a Scale official Telegram channel. So kind of whatever where you like to consume information, there's probably, you can get on the newsletter, whoever you are, you can keep up pretty easy.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jack, for all the information. I will leave all those links in the description box below as well to make it easy for the viewers. All the best with everything moving forward in gaming and with Scale Network, and let's follow up in the near future.
Thanks, Ashton.